The next chapter in the MonsterVerse, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, comes out in April. To celebrate, we're going through every film in the MonsterVerse. What better film to start off with than the one that started it all? It's 2014's Godzilla, here on the Atomic Lizards podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Atomic Lizards podcast. We're a trio of friends podcasting about the Godzilla franchise and other films we love. I'm Miranda, the film fanatic.
I'm Udi, the de facto film expert.
And I'm Dan, the Kaiju extraordinaire.
And on today's episode of Kaiju Korner, we are covering Godzilla 2014. Before we get into the episode, we have a special guest with us. Would you like to introduce yourself and your connection to Godzilla?
Hi, my name's Riley. I am kind of a new fan to kaiju in general. I'm a longtime interested in kaiju and the such. I guess recently got into actually going back into the filmography of Godzilla and other kaiju, but yeah, I would say I'm a new fan, but definitely well versed in my short time.
So you definitely fit right in to our little podcast here, because I'm a medium sort of level fan, and then Dan's our expert, and Udi is our newest fan of Godzilla.
I'm a newbie. I'm a new kid on the block.
Although we've been doing this for a year, so I don't know if you could say that anymore. But it's a pleasure to have you on the show, Riley. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It is going to be a good one.
All right. Well, today we're going to be talking about Godzilla 2014, which is about Ford Brody, a Navy bomb expert who just reunited with his family in San Francisco when he is forced to go to Japan to help his estranged father, Joe. Soon, both men are swept up in an escalating crisis when an ancient alpha predator arises from the sea to combat malevolent adversaries that threaten the survival of humanity. The creatures leave colossal destruction in their wake as they make their way toward their final battleground, San Francisco.
Godzilla 2014 is an American film directed by Gareth Edwards. It was produced by Legendary Pictures. It is the first film in the MonsterVerse and the 30th film in the Godzilla franchise as a whole, with it being the second American production. The film stars Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ken Watanabe, Elizabeth Olsen, Juliette Binoche, Sally Hawkins, David Strathairn, and Bryan Cranston.
This episode will have spoilers, so go watch it if you haven't. Now let's get started. What are your overall thoughts, and if you have a theater experience, what was it like seeing it? Riley, would you like to go first?
Yeah, of course. It was different in a good way in comparison to the older movies, because this is obviously the first in a decade of an American Godzilla, but a very fresh take on him, with still having classic roots and keeping the spirit of Godzilla alive. For a fresh audience, I think it was a really well done movie. I didn't have a theater experience personally. I think it was still too far back for me to have a deep interest like I do currently, because I would have definitely loved to have seen it. But no, I don't have a theater experience, but I think the movie is incredible, and I would love to see it in theaters if it comes back for a rerun of sorts. But yeah.
It would be really cool to see in a theater. It's definitely something that I think would benefit from a theater experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
You never know, with the popularity of the MonsterVerse right now, they might re-release them before Godzilla x Kong comes out, but that remains to be seen. Not gonna get my hopes up though.
They could do like a whole day marathon. We have to take the whole day off of work to watch all of MonsterVerse.
I'd do it.
Of the Guardians of the Galaxy
probably.
movies.
Yeah. So I will go next. Just because I don't have much to say for my brief thoughts. But in general, I think it's a well-made movie. It has some interesting plot elements. Visually, it looks good, although I do have an issue with it is that everything is very dark. It's very shadowy, it's very gray, it's very smoky. So it's kind of hard to tell what's going on, and that's why I think a theater experience would benefit the movie because they have better projectors, better quality than my tiny little like 10-year-old TV. Overall, I liked the general Godzilla-ness of the whole thing. And I liked the redacted titles at the beginning. And I actually watched this movie for the first time in 2022. So I actually have my first like full initial thoughts on this movie because I logged it on Letterboxd because that's what I do. But yeah, so most of these things still stand. The Muto sound design is really cool. The sets look real, and the monsters seem to have proper weight and proportion for the size that they are. They've moved through the cities and areas very much like how they would. My note says that I liked the blue fireball energy blast, so I'm assuming that's the atomic breath. Apparently, at the time, I did not know that. And I said, overall, not bad, it's entertaining, and most of that still stands.
I find
So,
it. Oh, sorry. I just want to say I find it really funny that you referred to the atomic breath as like the blue fireball blast or whatever.
Common mistake.
yeah, well, I didn't know. This was
Yeah.
early into my Godzilla
Oh
obsession,
yeah.
so
Yeah, I understand. I know. I just think it's kind of funny.
yeah. So that's my brief thoughts. Udi, would you like to go next?
Yes, I would. So this is a movie that I've had quite a tumultuous relationship with. When I was in high school, as when this movie came out, and I was friends with Dan, and he was super hyped for it, and like the trailers were really enticing. Like it looked really, really good. Like I really liked the trailers, but I'd never watched a Godzilla movie before. Like I obviously knew who Godzilla was, and I was aware of the movies, but I don't know. It was just something that never really happened. Like I'm sure at some point in time, like growing up, like there's times where I might have caught snippets on TV or something, maybe, but like it was never like my. I don't know. It's weird because like my dad grew up with like kaiju movies and stuff. He grew up liking that stuff. Like he was a really big fan of Ultraman growing up, but I don't know. It just never really came up as a kid. So I don't know. We just never really watched. Plus, I mean, again, it doesn't help that there was like a 10-year gap between Godzilla movies and blah blah blah. But anyway, so I was getting hyped for it, and like Dan being a kaiju fan and mega like Godzilla fan was also getting me hyped up. But I know I was cautiously optimistic. So I was like, I don't really know what to expect, but it's fine. It looks good, and I'm intrigued. And that day we did a double feature of Godzilla and then also The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I remember being really bored watching Godzilla. And then I remember liking the ending because I was like, oh, it's so cool. And then Godzilla ends up like atomic breathing the Muto in the head, like through the throat, and like that was super cool. And I remember that was really hype, and I remember like people were clapping and stuff. I was like, oh my god, this is really cool. But I just remember feeling like I was really bored, and then all of a sudden it got really cool, and then it just kind of ended, and I was like, okay. And then I actually liked The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I still kind of do. So that's its own other thing. But yeah. However, so I didn't really like it at first. Like I thought it was fine. I didn't dislike it. I just thought it was fine. It was just a little boring, and like it was fine. Uh, but then when I finally rewatched it, I liked it more. And then when I rewatched it again after that, I really, really liked it. Like I was like, man, this movie's so like amazing. I love it. And then, it'd been a few years since I watched it. And then, a year ago we started doing this podcast, and I've watched a number of different kaiju, mainly Godzilla movies since then. And so watching this with renewed eyes, plus, watching it after arguably uh, one of the best Godzilla movies ever, Godzilla Minus One, maybe that didn't help, but I rewatched this movie, with like the expectation that I was going to really like it again, and it's fine. It's a mixed bag for me for sure. There's a lot of like high highs and not necessarily low lows, but just kind of like like it definitely runs into the problem where it has really good ideas and then doesn't really flesh them out well enough, and then like even the good stuff there, like there are some really good moments, but outside of that, I mean, it is just kind of like a movie, unfortunately. Just disappointing, I guess. I also, on this rewatch, it made me realize that I don't prefer hero Godzilla. I much prefer antagonistic Godzilla. So, for better or worse, that's a discovery I made on this viewing. But yeah, so saw it in theaters. It was a really fun theater experience because I'm sure Dan will talk about this more, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but he invited a lot of different people, and I feel like they made it a lot more fun because it was like all people that were in some way intrigued to go there, and then everyone was clapping and like hooting and hollering at the right moments. I don't know. It was a fun theater experience, so I'm glad I got to see it in theaters. What about you, Dan?
All right. You know, I do have a lot to say about this movie, but before I go into my thoughts about 2014's Godzilla, I want to talk about what it was like being a Godzilla fan waiting for this movie to come out. So I'm going to take you all back to the year of 2004. What came out in the year 2004? Why, Godzilla Final Wars. I remember going to Blockbuster, or not Blockbuster, I think it was Video Villa, back when video rental stores were still a thing. I rented Godzilla Final Wars, and I remember watching it and being like super excited about it. And like I remember even running into my parents' room, being like, "Oh my god, this just happened in this movie," and it was amazing. And then after I watched Godzilla Final Wars, it's like, all right, well, I can't wait for the next Godzilla movie. 2005 came along. Oh, well, no news on the new Godzilla movie. 2006, no new Godzilla movies yet. 2007. Well, in 2007, I went to go see the first Michael Bay Transformers, and there was a trailer for a new kaiju movie. And I remembered like being super excited. I was like, "Oh my god, a new giant monster movie. What is this? What is this?" Like, and the interesting thing about this movie trailer was it didn't give the title of the movie in the trailer. So I'm thinking, "Oh my god, are we getting a new Godzilla movie?" And I remember going back home and like telling my dad about it, and my dad looked it up on YouTube. Now, at the time, nobody knew what this movie was a trailer to. I'm sure you guys have already guessed what movie I'm referencing, but nobody knew what this trailer was for. So the YouTube video that my dad had clicked on at the time was called New Godzilla 2 Trailer. And I remember reading the description, like the guy was even like, I have no idea if this actually is Godzilla, but like, what else could it be? So I got excited. I was like, oh my God, it's a new Godzilla movie. We're getting a new Godzilla movie. Yes. No. Because I remember like another day, my sister's boyfriend at the time, like I remember walking into the living room and he was like, "Hey, that trailer for that new monster movie, it's called Cloverfield. It's not a Godzilla movie." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Okay,
So
so I listened to another podcast. It's called the Godzilla Podcast. It's about
yeah,
Godzilla. They also thought that movie was gonna be a Godzilla movie. Like they talked about it on their episode. They're like, yeah, we totally thought it was a whole new Godzilla movie. So I wonder how many more fans thought that back in the day.
yeah, exactly. It's because I mean, you think about it, the kaiju genre, especially here in America, especially way back when or way back then, still wasn't very popular. This was before Pacific Rim and all these other movies came out. So the only popular kaiju in America at the time was Godzilla. So to get like a new kaiju movie, I can only imagine everybody's first thought is, oh, it's Godzilla, because like what other kaiju did people know about other than King Kong? You know, so and there was a new King Kong movie just 2 years before this, the 2005 Peter Jackson remake. So it made sense for all of us to be thinking it was Godzilla, but nope, it was a completely original giant monster. For the movie called Cloverfield, which we do need to cover that on the podcast one day. That'd be a fun episode. But yeah, so it wasn't a new Godzilla movie, and I remember just being on the internet constantly thinking, "All right, when are we gonna get the next Godzilla movie? When are we gonna get the next Godzilla movie? I need the next Godzilla movie, man. I'm tired of waiting." And there was rumors, like in 2009, there was a rumored new Godzilla film that was going to be coming out. and like it was going to be like an an IMAX short film, and I remember the working title was like Godzilla 3D to the max. So it was going to be like an IMAX 3D short film where Godzilla was going to attack Las Vegas. And I was thinking, oh, okay, that could be cool. You know, it's new Godzilla content, but unfortunately, nothing ever happened with that project. And yeah, as we all know, I had to wait 10 years before we got a new Godzilla movie. And I remember hearing when Legendary Pictures first acquired the rights to Godzilla. Like, I think it was around, I want to say 2010, because at the time, Godzilla 2014 was supposed to come out in 2012. Like, I remember seeing the news break, like, there's a new Godzilla movie got announced. Legendary Pictures has acquired the rights to Godzilla, new film set to come out in 2012. So I was like, yes, finally, we're getting a new Godzilla movie. And I remember, like, the very first image that was revealed wasn't Godzilla's design as we know it today. It was like this, like I would call it like a very early concept design for his MonsterVerse design. So I just remember just seeing that image all the time, because at that point, that was all we had for this new Godzilla movies. We just had that one image. Well, 2012 would roll around and the movie didn't come out. So I'm thinking, oh, what happened? Like, what happened? I thought this was supposed to come out in 2012. I don't remember the exact details as to why this movie got delayed, but eventually it would be found out that the movie would be coming out in 2014. And then, like, I remember I followed this one website at the time called Godzilla-movies.com or .net or something like that, and they would always constantly be coming out with updates. So I would be like glued to that website to see what the next update for the 2014 Godzilla movie would be, and they would share like set photos, like casting announcements, stuff like that. And then I remember the first trailer for this movie that was revealed was closed to the public. It was revealed only to people at, I want to say 2012 or 2013 San Diego Comic-Con. Like, you had to be at Comic-Con in order to watch this trailer, and I was so upset. I was like, no, I need to see this trailer. And I think it took a year or so, but eventually the trailer got leaked online, and I was finally able to view it. And it was a cool trailer. Like, it had the Oppenheimer's famous "Now I have become death, destroyer of worlds" speech just plastered over his like settings of destroyed cities and whatnot. And I was like, I got super excited, but man, I was not ready for the day the actual trailer was revealed for this movie. And let me tell you, here's what I'm going to tell you all about the MonsterVerse right here, right now. The MonsterVerse is phenomenal with their movie trailers. Literally every movie trailer for every MonsterVerse movie is amazing, and Godzilla 2014 is no exception. The trailer to this movie was awesome. You had all of these soldiers doing this like high altitude jump in the middle of like a thunderstorm. And they had the music from 2001: A Space Odyssey playing, and just the visuals, everything was incredible. I have never been more hyped for a movie than I was for 2014's Godzilla. And Udi can attest to this because, you know, we were in high school. I was so goddamn excited for this movie because the trailer looked amazing. This is the first Godzilla movie we're getting in 10 years. This is the first American-made, Hollywood-produced Godzilla movie we're getting, and the design looks good. It doesn't look weird like the 1998 design. I was so excited for this movie, and I don't remember ever being that hyped for something. Like, the hype I had for Godzilla 2014 was on like another level. Like, I watched the trailer constantly. I was glued to that website to see what new updates were coming out. I was scouring YouTube for any new footage I can find, any new TV spots, anything. I was so freaking excited for this movie. And it finally came out. So what did I think of Godzilla 2014? Well, at the time, I loved Godzilla 2014, and that's because, and I'll get into it later, but I had a wonderful theater experience. And that experience really elevated that movie in my eyes. And I really loved this movie at first. And, you know, I was probably a little bit of recency bias as well, because once again, this was the first new Godzilla movie we'd gotten in 10 years. So there is a little bit of recency bias, a little bit of the whole theater experience I had, but I love this movie, and I loved this movie so much. I'm sorry, Udi, I don't remember doing this, but according to Udi, I loved this movie so much that when Udi told me that he didn't like it at first, I punched him in the chest. I do not remember doing that. I am sorry, Udi, for doing that to you, but yeah.
Well, for context, so we were both in track at the time, in track and field, and we were both long distance runners. And so one day after practice, it was like the Monday after like the weekend of release for this movie, and we were talking about it, and I guess we hadn't like seen each other all day or something. I don't know, but so we were finally talking about it. It was like, and Dan was kind of because he had invited so many people that like at the end of the movie, like we didn't really get too much of a chance to talk after the movie. I feel like so then like we were finally catching up, talking about the movie, and then I was just like, yeah, I don't know, I just thought it was like really really boring. And Dan was like, he was kind of trying to like just be like, well, you know, like maybe I'm like, no, I just feel like it wasn't that well done, blah, blah. Just kind of like listing off all my points. And I mean, maybe like not on purpose, but maybe I was just being a little overly critical. I don't know. I mean, I was a big movie kid. I've always loved movies, but like it wasn't until high school when I really started to get like really into movies. And so I'm sure I was probably being a little overly critical of the movie. But I mean, again, like I thought it was boring. I didn't really enjoy a lot of it. And but again, like I probably wasn't being careful about how I was saying things or anything, and like maybe saying it a little too harshly. I don't know. But then, yeah, all of a sudden I'm like talking to Dan, and then I just boom, he just punches me in the chest. He's like, "That's what you get," and like I don't remember what he said, but it's basically something like, "That's what you get," like I don't know. And he just like, and then we just kind of stood there, and I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe that just happened!" Like, because Dan is the most like calm, like chill, like relaxed person like you'll ever meet, and like I'd never seen him do anything like that. So like I was like, oh my god, what did I do? What have I done?
You insulted Godzilla in front of me. No, no,
And
like I
so
I
said,
mean, it is kind of boring though, so
well,
I totally get that.
here's the thing though, because
And
once
I
again,
totally get your reaction too.
yeah, well, once again, I don't remember doing this, so I'm taking Udi's word for it that I did do it because, yeah, like I could
I
see
wouldn't
myself,
lie.
yeah, and Udi wouldn't lie about it either. So that's the thing. Like I don't remember doing this, but like at the time, especially in high school, I just wasn't as mature as I am now when it
Right.
came to hearing criticisms about the things that I love. I mean, you see it all online all the time. Like most like example I think of that at the top of my head is the Super Mario Brothers movie. There was people like literally being like, "Oh, how can you say that about the Mario movie? Like it's a great movie. Shut up." You know, like I was like that in high school. Like if you criticized something that I loved, I would fight you for it. I apparently. So like but
Literally.
nowadays, yeah, literally, yeah.
I
But
mean, I
you know,
feel like that's like a universal high school experience, though. That's just how
yeah,
teenagers
it's
are.
well, not just teenagers, but just kids in general. Like think back to like the '90s with the console wars between Sega and Nintendo. How many playground fights were started over who was better, Nintendo or Sega? You know, so it's just like it was just, maybe Udi had some points in saying, oh, maybe I was being overly critical, but I also wasn't as mature back then as I was now. And I didn't know how to handle like taking harsh criticisms against things that I love. Nowadays, like, you know, I hear harsh criticism against something that I love, and I'd just be like, okay, well, it's interesting to hear your point of view, you know? So, but yeah, back then I wasn't that mature, so that might have something to do with it as well. But anyway, back to the point. So, yeah, I loved this movie when it first came out, and I saw it for the first time. But it's interesting because I kind of had the opposite effect that Udi had when he saw this for the first time. Udi saw this for the first time and he didn't really like it, but after subsequent rewatches, he started to like it more. Me, I saw it for the first time. I really loved it, but then after subsequent rewatches, I started to actually like it less. So it was kind of interesting that we both kind of had like opposite experiences, and I guess to actually go into like my real thoughts, I think that Godzilla 2014 is one of the most 6 out of 10 Godzilla movies ever. Like this movie has some
That
really
feels right.
yeah, Yeah, like this movie has some great aspects to it. Like you guys have already touched on the sense of scale, the cinematography at times, the monster like Godzilla himself. All of that stuff is great. Like the whole entire climax to the movie, great. Some of the best stuff we've gotten in a Godzilla movie. But this movie also has some major issues. First of all, the human aspect to any god. You ask anyone, what's the weakest part of any Godzilla movie, and they're always going to tell you the human story. And Godzilla 2014, unfortunately, didn't really break the mold that much because I think that the human stuff, while it starts off interesting, takes a nosedive after Ford's father dies. Brian Cranston, or it's not Brian Cranston, but Joe Brody, played by Brian Cranston. I think after Joe dies, and there's actually a lot of people that, you ask them about 2014 and they'll agree with you that this movie takes a nosedive as soon as they kill off Joe Brody because now we're stuck with Ford. And unfortunately, I just don't think that Ford is that interesting of a character. He's very boring, and it's a shame that we pretty much just follow him the entire time because nothing that he does is ever interesting and makes sticking with his character worthwhile.
Yeah.
Now,
I agree with that. He's like a wet noodle. Like
Exactly.
there's nothing there.
And like Udi has, because me and Udi have talked about this before, and like Udi does bring up kind of a good point where maybe he's supposed to be like a vessel for the audience. And I'm sure Udi can go more into that too, but like I just feel like everything just happens around Ford. Like it's pure main character syndrome. Like literally wherever Ford is somehow wherever all the kaiju go, and it gets kind of ridiculous at times. So it's just like I don't like the human aspect. The constant cutting away from the Godzilla scenes got very aggravating. Like when it happened the first time, it was kind of funny because it cuts to a news segment, and like little kids like, "Mommy, look, dinosaur," like that's kind of funny, fine. But I still would have liked to have seen that airport fight scene. But like
I just wanted to cut in real quick.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that if they had just, because they set it up so perfectly, like the stage was set, it was perfect. Like they do like a slow intro to Godzilla, and then you finally get to see him like fully, and it's like, oh man, he looks so good. Like, oh man, it's gonna be such a good fight, and then it just cuts away, and that's it. And it's like, what? Like, how did you cut away from that?
Exactly, dude. And like you were saying, they set it up perfectly. In fact, the airport scene, even though it's super short, is one of my favorite scenes in the movie because you got all these explosions happening, people are screaming, and then you just see Godzilla's foot stomp. And when that foot stomps, everybody goes quiet. And I remember like being in the theater and like the people I was sitting around, like there were people behind me going, oh my god, it was super cool. So it's just like, yeah, Godzilla's foot stomps, everybody goes quiet. And then the male Muto looks at him, starts like sizing him up, and then they got the 2001 music playing again, slowly pan up to Godzilla, you see his face, and then he roars. And that roar is awesome. And yeah, like you were saying, man, just so perfectly set up. I really wish they just would have shown us the airport fight because, like, you even agree, Udi. And I think that's what you just said. If they would have just shown that fight, this would be a better movie by default.
For sure. Like, I do have one other thing that I would add that, like, I feel like would have improved it a lot. But I feel like just having this fight, and like, I think the big thing would be that like maybe either Godzilla would lose or just that the Muto could get away, and that way you could have like the same third act basically. But I just feel like having the airport fight would have raised this movie up like another star, or maybe even two, depending how good it was. Because, again, like, it's just the fact that there's so little Godzilla action in this until the very end, and then even on this rewatch, I was like, honestly, I feel like the Godzilla action in the third act really isn't even that amazing. Like, especially on like in retrospect, like it's not bad, but there's just so many like weird little decisions that they made, and I feel like it could have been so much better, and I don't know. But just one.
I was just going to say I agree with you, but go ahead.
Okay. And then just the other quick thing that I wanted to add was that I feel like the other thing that would have made this better is if they had made Godzilla the antagonist and then have it be more like a traditional Toho movie sort of thing, where it's like Godzilla is the antagonist and you represented like their grief of Joe's wife slash Ford's mom like dying at the beginning, and then being like manifesting their grief, and then finally at the end like them being able to surpass their grief, move on, and reunite their family, and then Godzilla gets defeated at the end supposedly, and then obviously comes back and blah blah. But I just feel like him just being like a hero from the get-go was like like I don't know, it just felt so meh. Like him just kind of showing up and being the hero and like never even really posing a threat. I was like, I don't know. It's just boring.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I will say this, Godzilla isn't supposed to be the quote unquote hero. He's just framed that way because the movie wants to make him be like he's just an animal that's hunting. And he just so happens to be getting in. Because think about it, like Godzilla flood, like literally when he surfaces in Honolulu for the first time, he floods the streets. There are people still in the streets when that tsunami wave hits. Lots of people probably died during that. And then another part is on the Golden Gate Bridge, that scene when the military shoot, there's literally a part where he walks through the Golden Gate Bridge. He probably killed quite a few people. In fact, I don't want to spoil the Monarch show, but the Monarch show shows something that happens during that scene, and it's pretty awful. So, like, Godzilla in this movie, I don't think is meant to be heroic, at least not as bad as in 2019's King of the Monsters. And because in King of the Monsters, yeah, he's just a straight up hero in that movie. But in this movie, I remember like watching interviews with Gareth Edwards. Gareth really wanted to try to make him just a force of nature and this kind of like neutral party. He's just an animal that's hunting. But I will admit, there are parts in this movie where they frame him to be a hero. Like, I remember there was a lot of people, like, speaking of the Golden Gate Bridge scene, there's that part where he surfaces and all of those destroyer ships are shooting missiles. There was a lot of people that thought he surfaced and like saved the kids in that bus because like it looks like the missiles are about to hit the bus, but then Godzilla surfaces up and they hit him instead. So people were like, oh, Godzilla saved those kids on the bus. But I always viewed that scene as they were just shooting at Godzilla. Like, so I don't view him as like saving the kids in that scene. But yeah, I can, and then especially like at the end of the movie where like everybody's cheering for him. I don't like that part, that scene at the end of the movie where like everybody's cheering and you see him on the it's like, yeah, go Godzilla, you just destroyed San Francisco while fighting the Mutos. Our town is devastated. It's gonna take us years to rebuild, and who knows how many people are dead or buried. But yeah, you go Godzilla. Like that's a dumb scene. I don't like that scene. But anyway,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I will say that, like, I mean, I haven't watched Monarch yet, so I don't know what the context is there. But just in the context of this movie alone, I feel like they didn't do a good job. Like, I like that idea that Gareth had, but I don't feel like they did a great job of executing it, because it definitely felt like most of the movie, it's like the humans following alongside in their like aircraft carrier, whatever ship, with Godzilla, and like kind of like tagging along. So like it never really felt like they were that. And then yeah, like at the end, like everyone's cheering for him, and so it's like it doesn't really feel like people are afraid of him that much, at least, especially compared to like other versions. Like the second that they see him, it's like it strikes fear in their hearts. Like, and this one's like, okay, well, he'll do the right thing and he'll stop the other big monsters. And it's like, I mean, yeah, it's cool, but I just feel like it just didn't work well with like, oh, he's just a force of nature, he's just an animal. Because it, like, yeah, the scenes that you mentioned, like, I guess, yeah, they're good for like, they're good scenes where he's kind of just doing his own thing and he's kind of messing with humans, but it was never that bad. Like, he didn't just like this, well, until the ending, I guess. It didn't seem like he was just like walking through cities nonchalantly, like, I gotta hunt this Muto down, and then just kind of wreaking havoc no matter what. And again, like, I didn't really feel like humans were that afraid of him. Like, obviously on the bridge, like, they were shooting at him or whatever, but I don't know. Compared to like other movies with Godzilla, I just don't feel like they did a good job of kind of showing that he's more of like a neutral party. He really just felt mostly like he's being touted up and like built up as the hero, and then at the end, yeah, you get that ridiculous scene where everyone's like, "Woo, go big man!" And it's like, why would you be cheering for that?
I wonder if that has something to do with the fact that this is American made and not a Japanese one, because well, Godzilla's like was created because of the nuclear bombs, and it has that root there. Whereas like this is American made Godzilla movie, so it's like we it's a different type of like feeling towards Godzilla. Does that make sense?
I mean, yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about. I'm not sure if that would be what they were going for, but it is something to think about.
Yeah. Have to think about that more. So that went a little off from your brief overall thoughts. Did you
Yeah,
have anything else to
I'm
add, or can we
sorry.
dive into the questions?
I'm sorry, but yeah, just let me finish up here. Yeah,
Okay.
we did kind of
We
delve a little
tangented a little
yeah,
bit, but on topic.
at least it was still on topic. At least our tangent was still about the movie, but yeah. So yeah, the only other issues I had with this movie was the constant cutaways. There was literally a point when I was watching this in the theater, and it was during the scene where they're in San Francisco, and it's that scene where Elizabeth Olsen runs into the shelter, and we're seeing Godzilla fight the male Muto for a little bit, and like the doors close, and then it transitions to the Halo jump scene. I remember in the theater literally saying aloud, "Stop doing that," because I was just getting annoyed by the cutaways. And like Gareth Edwards explained, like I get why he was doing it, because he wanted to build up anticipation so we could have a huge payoff at the end. But he just did it too much. It was too much. But yeah, those were the biggest issues I had with Godzilla 2014. I think that the human stuff is very dull, very boring, and I didn't like the constant cutaways. And I also, another big issue I have with this movie is I feel like it focuses more on the Muto than it does Godzilla. The movie's called Godzilla, but I feel like the Muto get more screen time. That's another big issue I had with this movie, and that was an issue I had back when I first saw it in 2014.
I was gonna say about what you were saying earlier with like Godzilla being like just hunting his prey and stuff. I think it's to me it's less of him being a hero and just him being like the ruler of Earth in a way, and we're kind of just insects in his way. Like he doesn't bother to interact with us. Like someone's messing around on his turf, so he wakes up and deals with it and then goes back to sleep. Like I think he's more of something like that than he would be, like you said, saving children on the bus. That's not really his deal, but he's also not gonna go out of his way to trample everyone. I think he is kind of just taking back his turf with the Mutos and dealing with them and kind of keeping casualties as low as he can, even though it's not a big deal for him. I think we just don't matter to him in a way like most people wouldn't really bother not stepping on an ant or something. It's less of a deal for him, I would say.
A good point. I guess like framing it like that is more interesting. I guess. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like, and again, maybe this is just me comparing it more to other Godzillas and not just taking this for what it is, and that could definitely be a thing. But I just feel like other Godzillas who are a little bit more neutral, or maybe just a little bit more malevolent or evil, like would just step on people, or like would just crush or destroy the ships, because like that Godzilla doesn't care. But like you said, maybe just this one, he just uses like insects, and so he's like, yeah, there's not really a point in like messing with them too much. Like they can't do anything to me, but I don't see the point of like shaking the bee's nest or something. Like he wants to like leave it alone. So yeah, that's a good point.
So, as you noticed, we got a little sidetracked on brief thoughts, but that's okay. We had a valuable conversation. I think we kind of know where we all stand on this one now. So, I was just curious, what do you guys think of the Mutos as kaijus and their design? And also, what do you think of this new Godzilla design, which is very different than the Toho version?
Starting from the beginning of the movie, how it's kind of a misdirect in a way because we don't know what this nest cocoon thing they have fenced off is. I mean, people were thinking it would be Mothra or some form of Godzilla in a way, but then it became its own thing. I think that was a great misdirect or just introduction even to what this thing is and finding out what it can do, what its abilities are with its EMPs, and its, I don't, would you call it echolocation, because it's calling to the male and female
Yeah.
they're calling. So I would say finding out its abilities and all that. But I think it's done really well with their design. I don't really have any complaints with them. I think it was great.
Yeah, they definitely are very distinct looking. And I do think they like handled or the Mutos well. From my understanding is that Legendary and Warner Brothers didn't have the rights to any of the other Toho kaijus, so that's why they created the Mutos. So they're definitely unique because beforehand, before I was really familiar with Godzilla and stuff, I wonder if I would have gotten them mixed up with Mothra if I had known. Well, I didn't know who Mothra was. So I wonder if other people also were like, ah, yes, totally, that's Mothra. But
Yeah, my even my girlfriend was saying that we saw the Muto emerge for the first time, and she's like, "Oh, that's Mothra." I'm like, "No, it's not." But from an outsider's view, you don't really know. But I think they did well with differentiating them and making them their own.
I do like the sound design for them. I did mention that earlier, but I think this movie does have good kaiju sound effects in it.
Very much agree. I think all of the kaiju sound really, really, really good. They look and sound amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, because Godzilla's roar, like Dan was saying earlier, it was phenomenal. His first introduction with his roar, but how they obviously made it brand new with a modern sound, but you could still hear the classic roar and bass to it that he had in the classic movies. I thought it was. I don't think you could have asked for better.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself.
But yeah, I will say, because like again, like I was aware of Godzilla before this movie came out, and so when Dan started showing me stuff about this movie, and then I saw that like how this design was and everything, like I was really impressed with the design. I really I thought he looked really really cool. I thought it was like really interesting modern reinterpretation of Godzilla, but in like a way that felt a little bit more grounded and made him look just like had a lot of texture. I felt like the proportions were pretty good. I will say, like looking back, like his thighs in this movie were a little too thick, but otherwise, and like the shape of his feet was like a little bit nubby. I feel like a little bit too nubby. But outside of that, I think he was a really really good design, and they got like the proportions basically all right because in subsequent movies proportions kind of change from movie to movie, and we'll get to that in those other movies. But in this one, very good. And then the Muto just looked really really cool. I love how the Muto is like an electronic organic kaiju, like the whole EMP power, and then like the way that the eyes kind of look like digital. Like it's just so cool to me. I love how it like both the designs, both the male and the female Muto look so freaking cool. So definitely a very cool design. And I did think in this, like upon rewatching the movie, I thought it was interesting that they said they decided to go with like a brand new kaiju and not like bring back an old one right away. And I definitely feel like this is a very interesting direction to go for like introducing a brand new monster to like the Godzilla lore.
Yeah, I agree about not bringing any back because I think it was smart to not put all their eggs in a basket and bring back a fan favorite when they could build up hype with Godzilla returning along with a classic in the next movie because that was bound to happen. But yeah, I agree. Bringing a fresh kaiju to the movie was a good choice.
Did you already share your thoughts, Miranda? I don't remember.
About the Mutos, but not Godzilla.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Godzilla's design?
I think he's kind of stubby. But I think that works for the Godzilla that he is. Um, Obviously it's CGI, so there's no guy in a suit. I mean, well, there might be motion capture for this Godzilla, I don't actually know if that was a thing. But I recently saw a picture of the 2014 Godzilla next to like the 2021 Godzilla, and they definitely changed his proportions a lot. But I think this Godzilla works well. He's still very spiky. He's still very like scaly and stuff. I wish they would have kept a little more with like the classic design, just like more boils and bubbles and stuff. It's still incorporated into the design that I like, but I just wish there was a little bit more. And like I said earlier, he looks like he has weight. So does the Mudos. They're very grounded. They have like a physical mass. Because sometimes CGI characters can just look noodly and weightless. So at least like these ones look and feel. And they use the sound design and the sets and stuff to make sure they feel like giant monsters, because that doesn't always come across in the kaiju movies. So yeah.
All right. Well, I guess I'll share my thoughts on Godzilla's design and Muto design as a whole. Why don't I start off with Godzilla's design? I like Godzilla's design in this movie. Now, once again, being a longtime Godzilla fan, like this was anything that looked similar to how Godzilla is supposed to look was a win in my eyes. Now, granted, when Godzilla 1998 came out, well, that was the first Godzilla movie I ever saw. That was the first time I ever got introduced to Godzilla. So, like, when I saw that movie the first time, I wasn't bothered by his design because I didn't know what Godzilla was supposed to look like. But once I got older and I actually started watching, the real, well, not the real, but I started watching the Japanese Godzilla movies, and I found out, okay, this is what he's supposed to look like. I look back on the 1998 design and I think, oh man, like what were they thinking? So this design.
They were thinking, let's do Jurassic Park.
Yeah, exactly. So this design just by default is a step up from the 1998 design because Godzilla actually looks like Godzilla. Like they got the elements of his design there. They got his dorsal plates. They got his like smaller, somewhat T-Rex style head. They got his like shorter arms and like his bigger like legs slash thighs and his longer tail. They got the design right. Now, is it my favorite Godzilla design of all time? No, it's not. I'd have to probably think about what my favorite Godzilla design of all time is, but like this design isn't bad for what it is. I think at times like he looks a little too fat. If I'm being honest, like I think back to the end of the movie when he wakes up and he starts walking away and we see that shot of him from behind where he looks really fat in that scene. So like yeah, that's kind of funny, and like his dorsal plates can look a tad small at times, but other than that, I think this design succeeds for what it was made to do. And it was made to be a Hollywood rendition of Godzilla, and I think it works. If you ask me, I think it works. And like part of his design is interesting to me because like his head, for example, very crocodilian like. It kind of reminds me of like crocodiles, and with the way his scales are lined out too. And it was interesting because Miranda, you had mentioned that you wish they would have kept some of the more like parts of his original design in there, like the boils and whatnot. And it's interesting because like this movie was going for like a completely different direction with Godzilla, because you think back to the original Japanese films, especially the 1954 film, Godzilla was made to represent the atomic bomb and all the horrors that came with the atomic bomb. This Godzilla has nothing to do with that. Like this Godzilla is supposed to be an ancient animal. So I think that's probably explains some of the design decisions they made with him in terms of his skin and whatnot.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's just, I don't know. It feels like something's missing. It feels like that Japanese original backstory is like missing from this Godzilla. And that's also, I mean, that's probably because this is an American made one.
Yeah, and I get your point. But yeah, I feel like this Godzilla design succeeds. Like I said, is it the best Godzilla design of all time? Not necessarily, but for a Hollywood rendition of Godzilla, I like it. I think it works. Now on to the Mutos. I don't know. Like I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the Mutos because I do think their design is interesting. I like their design to an extent, but they don't feel like a Godzilla monster to me. Like when I think of Godzilla monsters, I think of Anguirus, King Ghidorah, Mothra, Ebra, these big old shrimp, you know, like lots of
The
Godzilla.
smog
The
monster.
smog monster, yeah, lots of Godzilla
They should have
kaiju.
brought him back.
They might, you never know, but lots of Godzilla kaiju have very unique and different designs to them. Like King Ghidorah is a three-headed dragon. Mothra, okay, she's a giant moth. Maybe it's not that unique, but still, it's cool. It's a giant moth, and Gearus is this like big spiky guy, and the Muto just look like generic aliens to me. That's just how I feel now. Their design, I think, is cool. I like their design, but as a Godzilla kaiju, I just don't find them to be that memorable because they just look like any other like sci-fi monster to me. And there's elements of like other sci-fi monsters in them. Like they really do remind me a lot of the Cloverfield monster because of the way their arms kind of move and the way that their arms look when they're like standing. It reminds me of the Cloverfield monster. And like I think there was also some inspiration from in terms of creature design from like Ridley Scott's like Alien franchise and whatnot. But yeah, I just feel like the Muto as Godzilla kaiju, I'm not the biggest fan because they're just not very memorable to me. And if I look at them, they don't look like they would be from a Godzilla movie to me because like I said before, Godzilla I personally, this is just how I feel, but I personally feel like Godzilla kaiju have like a distinct feel to them that differentiates them from any other like just regular sci-fi monster movie.
Would you say they feel more King Kongish and less Godzilla then?
I don't know. I wouldn't say King Kongish either because Kong is mainly more like prehistoric animals.
Okay.
I
I
feel.
was just thinking like Skull Island and stuff.
Yeah, because you got the skull crawlers, and the skull crawlers kind of have like a similar like kind of alien feel to them, like the Muto. And that's another thing is the Muto look like aliens. Like they do not look like they're from Earth. Like they're supposed to be from Earth, but they look like they're from outer space.
Yeah.
I can agree with that. They do definitely have more like an alien-y look. And I also do agree, even though I really like them, that yeah, I guess they don't really feel like a classic Godzilla like antagonist or like other monster for him to fight like against. It's definitely more. It's definitely different. It's just not the same feel at all. I did also feel like it was weird that the Mutos are just straight up eating bombs. Like I get that they need the radiation, but
Yeah,
like why would something organic eat a bomb? It's just metal and then like elements. Like how would
because the
that work?
radiation is in there. That's why.
I guess, but yeah, I remember watching them like look, I get it, but it's a little ridiculous. It's a little silly. I don't think you'd get much nutritional value out of. Like, look, I get the idea is that they're just eating radiation. How do you eat radiation? A bomb. Okay, sure, that makes sense, I guess. But like, still, it just felt like I was like, okay, all right, sure.
Riley, did you mention how you felt about Godzilla's design? I can't recall.
Um, I don't think I did, but well, maybe I did. I said something about him having a modern but also classic design. How
Mhm.
I think his body is more or less very reminiscent of classic Godzilla, but his head is like kind of a whole new thing. But it looks great. I think it looks intimidating and beefy, and it's not like a mid 70s Toho goofy style. It's he owns this land and he is not here to play. He looks very up to the task with his new design, but I think it's perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I actually really like the design of Godzilla's head. I will mention for me personally, one of the most important aspects for Godzilla, if you're designing Godzilla, one of the most important aspects to me personally is how you make his face look. Because, like, part of what makes Godzilla cool is just the way his head design is and the way his face looks and whatnot. And I like the face of the MonsterVerse design. I think it looks cool.
All right. Well, so if no one has any thoughts on that, any last second thoughts, then we can move on to how this movie compares to the Japanese films. Did you guys prefer the American take of a Godzilla movie, or do you guys prefer the Japanese takes of Godzilla movies?
That's kind of a loaded question because like there's only like what maybe a handful, like I could count all the American produced Godzilla movies on one hand, while there's close to like 30 Japanese made films, and all the Japanese films just completely differ in their genre because some you got the 1954 movie and Godzilla minus one, which came out recently, that are like serious dramas about dealing with the horrors of war. And then you got goofy like Godzilla versus Megalon, where it's freaking Jet Jaguar. He has his own theme song, and Godzilla's sliding on his tail. And then you got like, so it's just
Wait, is that where that one's from? That meme's from?
yeah, that's from Godzilla versus Megalon. So like, yeah, so
I
it's
did not
just
know that.
so that's kind of a tough question to answer, but personally, based off of everything that I see, I'll always take a Japanese filmed and produced Godzilla movie right now over an American filmed and produced one because Hollywood still has yet to really impress me with Godzilla.
Yeah, I think that's fair. With like you said, you could count how many American ones are on one hand, but I think you'd need to be a radioactive monster to count the Japanese ones on one hand. But I think you're right with that though. That you need the backlog or history of 30 plus movies to have this sort of fanfare and I guess expectation in a way. That I mean, I think I still prefer the Japanese ones just because it doesn't take itself too seriously, but can also be serious when it wants to. But I don't think you have that flexibility in the American ones just yet because it doesn't have the I don't know the safety net that it can be what it wants and the fans will love it regardless. I think you need the fans first before you can go to a Godzilla versus Megalon. But I think hopefully we'll get there at some point.
I wonder if the new one, Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire, or whatever it's called, if they'll start to go into more of that silliness. Because, like you said, you need the fan base to be like, okay, we're established, we have the fans, now we can go off into other things. I wonder if that one might be a starting point to that.
I feel like it's fair to say that we've already kind of gotten there in the MonsterVerse. Like, basically, the only one that kind of tried to be kind of grounded was 2014, and now like all the rest of them got just sillier and sillier as time went on. And just judging from the trailer alone, I feel like it's fair to say that Godzilla X Kong is just a no holds barred kaiju a thon of just fighting and craziness. But that being said, um, it was funny because I was actually thinking about this while I was watching this movie, and I feel like I mean I haven't watched the 1998 one, so I can't speak for that one or any other ones previous to this one if there were any. But I feel like the American Godzilla movies always have always basically felt the same from like the very beginning, like when they did the American re-release of the original 1954 one. It just feels like these are only made for like the American audiences. They're only made for entertainment purposes. Like they're not made to tell a grander story or to tell a heartfelt or thematically interesting story. It's just ooh, big monsters fight. Let's watch that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I just feel like it's interesting that in like the 70 years basically, if roughly, that like the Americans have had access to Godzilla movies or like access to making Godzilla movies, they don't really like doesn't seem like they've really tried to do anything that different. Like it's always just been like the same kind of movie. And I remember going into rewatching this movie, like I remember thinking, like my perception of this movie is like, oh yeah, it's very, it's very serious. I mean, it is. It's more grounded. It's a lot more serious than the subsequent MonsterVerse movies. But even still, it just never feels like it's trying to tell a more interesting story. It's just we have to wait to see the big monsters fight, and then we finally get that, and it's cool, and then the movie just ends. So I do feel like it's interesting to like see that after after watching the original American one and then watching this again. It's just like these movies are a lot more similar than I thought they were. Like again, like thinking about it, how I felt about this movie in particular in retrospect. That being said, though, I do feel like I also agree that it's hard to for sure say if you prefer the American ones or the Japanese ones, because to some degree, at least like the MonsterVerse, I didn't really like the American version of the original. Like it's fine, but again, like as we talked about in our first episode of our podcast, um, it just bothers me that they very purposely ignored what the reasoning for that movie was and changed it so that it was just purely like popcorn entertainment and basically just bastardized the idea for why that movie existed. But that being said, like the MonsterVerse movies, like they're a lot of great fun, and it's like the older Godzilla movies if they just had great VFX and like a Hollywood budget, I feel like. And so we're going to get there, so I don't want to talk about it too much, but like I was just recently watching Godzilla versus Kong from a couple of years ago, and it's crazy how much that movie reminds me of like older Godzilla movies, and yet it again, it's just a modern version of that. However, again, like I feel like if you like more of like the Japanese style where it's more of like the practical effects and like the suits and or in certain cases like more interesting stories like Godzilla minus one or from what I've heard Shin Godzilla and stuff like that, then I feel like it's automatically you would just prefer the Japanese ones. I guess that all being said, as far as like which ones do I find more interesting, I would say probably the Japanese ones, but again, I'll say it's probably the ones that are more few and far between than just all of them. But yeah, I think they all have their sort of appeal to some degree.
And I just want to add on real quick. So one thing that I really like what these American Godzilla movies do, I think personally, this is just how I feel, but I think if you're ever doing a Godzilla adaptation that isn't from Japan, I think you should go out of your way to try to include at least one Japanese character, because I love it when these American projects include Japanese characters because it feels like a Godzilla movie to me, because that's Godzilla's roots. Japan is his roots, and I really like it when these movies have Japanese characters like Ken Watanabe's Dr. Serizawa in 2014, and then like um the Monarch show follows the main characters are Japanese, and I really like it when these movies have that because it makes the film feel true to its roots in my eyes. So I think more studios should strive to have more Japanese characters in these Godzilla adaptations.
Not to get too off topic, but on that note, because I'm curious, how do you feel about this interpretation of Dr. Serizawa? Because it's completely different
This is
in this
not.
movie.
This guy is Dr. Serizawa in name only. He is not the same character from the 1954 film, if you ask me. If
Oh, for
anything,
sure.
he's a completely different character, but his name is just a little Easter egg. Because yeah, he's not the same character, and I don't mind this version of Dr. Serizawa. I think he's fine. I think the original Dr. Serizawa from 1954 is just more interesting because his design is cooler because he has an eye patch. So like, his design is cooler and like he's a scientist and whatnot. So that's all cool, but the thing is that even the Dr. Serizawa in the 1954 film there wasn't a lot to his character. He was just a scientist that developed a weapon and didn't want that weapon to get out. But he was a good man really deep down. So, and this Dr. Serizawa, I do like him. I think he's interesting. They give him a lot of cool lines to say. So like one of the most famous lines from the movie is "Let them fight," and like yeah, he gets to say that. So like, I don't mind this character. I kind of like him.
What about you, Miranda? Miranda, and you, Riley. What do you guys think of Serizawa? At least in comparison to like the original Serizawa.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. His reference to the classic Serizawa and him being like the head of knowing what to do about Godzilla in a way, um, outside of military stuff. But yeah, I think if you haven't seen the original, then you wouldn't catch that, obviously, because it's not like used later on. So obviously something tragic happens to the original Serizawa we won't speak of. But I think it was a good acknowledgement. And I think there's a few other ones. One of the characters' last name is Honda from the director Honda. But yeah, just about Serizawa, I think it was just a good nod and a good character. I liked him a lot.
Agreed. I like, even though, yeah, like you guys have been saying, he's definitely just Serizawa in name only, but I think he's still kind of like a fun character, or at least like one of the most interesting characters of this movie for sure. And definitely has like some of the best lines in the movie. What about you, Miranda?
Well, I don't really remember anything he does in this movie. The more we're talking about this movie, the more I don't think it's stuck in my brain. Like, it's not in there. I don't know what happened, but it's not in there. But I do like the fact that he's named Dr. Serizawa, because it'd be like, hey, it's Dr. Serizawa, although I prefer the other Dr. Serizawa. Just in like, because of the original movie and the topic of the original movie, his character makes a lot of sense in there. But yeah, I really don't remember much of his character in this one. And also, I prefer the Japanese films over the American films. Like, that's not that hard of a question for me to answer. So the fact that you guys are all like, I don't know, it's kind of hard to answer there. I was like, oh, was not expecting that. I don't
Well,
know.
I just want to say it's not that it was hard to answer. It's just not a good comparison because you're comparing like 30 plus films to like 5. So
Yeah,
it's not a very apt comparison, but
I mean,
I
yeah, I
yeah.
guess so. But the Japanese ones can be serious and very silly, and at least in the Showa era, and some of the millennial ones, I've seen those. They're like out there. They're kind of strange. They're kind of all over the place. They're weird, and like I like a practical effect. But like the American ones, I find very American. Like it's we're the military. We're gonna take our guns and we're gonna shoot things because we're the military and we're American and we're gonna do that. So it's just like jarring, and I don't really want to watch that. So that's why I gravitate more towards the Japanese ones.
Yeah, I will say that like when it comes to the American and the Japanese films, I think one of the reasons why I tend to like the Japanese films better is cuz think about it. What have the American films always used? They've always used CGI. CGI is very expensive, and unless you have uh like MCU movie in like its golden years type of budget, like you're not going to be able to spend too many scenes with that expensive CGI. Well, I'm saying that now, but supposedly Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire, is going to have scenes that just have the monsters in them, and long scenes too, like 8-minute long scenes with just the monsters. So maybe
So is
I'm
it gonna be an animated kaiju movie then?
yeah, I don't know,
Like, oh,
but
sorry, I mean a live action kaiju movie, because if Lion King can be considered live action, so can that then, right?
yeah, exactly. So like I may just be, not correct here, but anyway, the point is at least up until Godzilla X Kong the New Empire, these movies have relied heavily on CGI, and they don't have a lot of scenes with the monsters in them because the CGI is expensive. But most of the Japanese films use suitmation, and suitmation isn't as expensive as CGI. And I've talked about this with you guys before. My bread and butter with Godzilla movies is seeing Godzilla cause some destruction. I love seeing Godzilla cause destruction. I love watching him destroy cities. It's the reason why I love watching Godzilla movies. I love to see him destroy stuff. And none of these American movies except for Godzilla vs. Kong, and even then, it wasn't that much in Godzilla vs. Kong, have ever shown Godzilla destroying a city. And that has been the biggest disappointment for me with these American films, because the Japanese films have tons of great scenes where Godzilla is just wrecking Tokyo or wrecking Okinawa or whatever city he's attacking. Like, I love those scenes, and none of these American movies have it. Like I said, we got close with Godzilla vs. Kong, but it's only like 1 minute, maybe 2 minute long scenes. And then I will say that's one of my biggest disappointments with Godzilla 2014, because one of the reasons why I was so hyped for Godzilla 2014 was because I wanted to see Godzilla destroy a city with all the Hollywood budget behind it. And I didn't get that. And I was really disappointed that I didn't get that.
Yeah, I don't. There's just something so satisfying as a person destroying a set, like like in Zombieland, they get to destroy a set there, and like in the Japanese Godzilla movies, there's a dude in a suit destroying a set, and it's practical. It's just something about that has such a real feel because it is, whereas when you try to translate into CGI, I feel like most of the time it like falls flat. And that could be because like I recently have been learning to pick up on like small details and like how CGI is made and how they do all their stuff. So maybe I'm just learning too much and that like illusion is broken now. But it would be really nice just to see them destroy something, like be really cool.
Yeah, and I'm mainly talking about just full on the monster, like Godzilla destroying buildings. Like, I'm not talking
Yeah.
about buildings getting destroyed in a fight. Like, I want to see Godzilla just lay waste to a city with a Hollywood budget, and none of these movies, none of these MonsterVerse movies have given me that, and it's
I
kind
mean,
of frustrating.
fight in Hong Kong, right? And
Yeah, well, that's why I'm saying Godzilla versus Kong kind of gave it to me, because like
okay.
there's that part where he attacks Florida in the beginning of the movie, like that's kind of an attack there. And then yeah, the Hong Kong scene, there's one of the I don't want to get into Godzilla versus Kong because I'd rather save it for the Godzilla versus Kong
Yeah,
discussion,
yeah,
but there is a
we could
scene in that
table it.
movie that's classic Godzilla to me, and I love it. But yeah,
We could get into that. Did we have anything else to add to the comparison preference on these movies?
I want to add to what you were saying, and I want to say that I understand like what you mean about like the difference in like the suitmation and then like the like VFX, and like yeah, the American ones 110% just feel very American. Like I think it was King of the Monsters that I was watching, and I was like, this just feels like the Bayification of Godzilla, and like for better or worse, depending on who you ask again. But like again, like I feel like the American ones to me have just always just been about have just been dumb, brainless, big monster fight, go boom like movies. And so like after finally accepting that that's just the reality, that that's just how they've always been and that's how they're always probably just going to be, I find enjoyment in that. And like yeah, sure, a lot of the human stories are just really boring or stupid, but like at the end of the day that's not what I'm there for. So like again, like not to get too much in the American ones, the MonsterVerse ones, because we're about to talk about them all. Um, but yeah, like they're all pretty just boring or dumb. But then when we actually get to like the monster ones, like again, they all have kind of different physics, and it all, if you prefer summation, like you're never gonna like the VFX ones. But I mean, I think there's also something inherently cool because like practical effects and like sets get very expensive, and to some degree like you couldn't do what a lot of these monsters movies are doing with suits. Like even if they looked really cool or whatever, like you couldn't get the movement right, you wouldn't be able to get like it just wouldn't look as good, or at least like it wouldn't look as destructive. And so I feel like for me that is part of the appeal. Like yeah, they're stupid, and probably none of them match up to like any or most of the Japanese ones, but I still feel like they have their appeal in that sense of like you're seeing stuff that you couldn't see because none of the Japanese movies have nearly the budget that these have, and like you're seeing visuals that you could never see because I mean even the new Japanese ones that are using VFX, like they just don't have high enough budget to give you scenes that are as gratuitous as like King of the Monsters and Godzilla versus Kong, and stuff like that. So I do feel like it has its own appeal, but I understand not preferring that. I understand just preferring the more physical, like more physicality of the older ones. And I was talking to you guys about this the other day, but I would be kind of curious to see if, like, I don't know if an American, like, I don't know if the MonsterVerse would ever do this. Probably not, because that train has sailed. But I would be very curious to see if they could do like maybe Toho one with a higher budget, but like have mixed, like have someone in a suit like destroying like a city like practically, and then just touch it up with VFX to like really add more destruction to the city and also just add more movement to the suit and blah blah blah. Like I really do wonder how good that could look if they could do it right. But I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see if that ever happens.
That could definitely be something very interesting to see, because like that would be a really fun experiment to have them do. So maybe one day we'll get that.
Udi had a point in saying that there are stuff that happens in the MonsterVerse that just would not be possible to do with classic suitmation. So that was a good point. I do agree with that. But man, I just want my city destruction scenes. Give me my city destruction scenes and I'll be happy.
I'm sure they'll come. I'm sure they'll come. I would like to turn the discussion to like an open last thoughts, anything we didn't bring up, anything you have a strong desire to talk about. Say it now, I guess.
So I want to ask you all, what are some of your guys' favorite scenes from this movie?
I think I could speak for everyone with the ending where he breathes down the Muto's throat. Classic, very hardcore, and I don't think you can top it. That's all.
That's a good one. I agree.
Yeah, agree. I have the movie on in the background and that scene just played and I was like, yeah, no, that's a great scene.
That scene is amazing.
It's so well done.
It really is. I remember. Okay, you know what? I actually never talked about my theater experience. I'm going to mention that real quick. So my theater experience for this movie is one of the best theater experiences I've ever had. So as Udi has mentioned before, I was in high school when I was a senior in high school when this movie came out. I was going to be graduating soon. This movie came out in May, around the time when I was graduating. So I decided, you know what? I've been waiting for this movie forever. I'm so hyped. I'm just going to invite everybody. So I literally went around the school and anybody that like I was friendly with at all, I asked him, "Hey, you want to go see this movie with me?" And I asked close to like 30 people and we all went to go see this movie together. We literally took up like 2 entire rows at the top of the theater and biggest group of people I've ever seen a movie with, and it was awesome because yeah, like we were clapping, like when Godzilla used his atomic breath for the first time, we were all clapping, and like when he kills the male Muto with his tail swipe, we were cheering, and then the kiss of death scene where he's spitting the atomic breath down the female Muto's mouth, like yeah, we were all cheering. It was amazing. Probably one of the best theater experiences I've ever had. But yeah, that scene was really good. And I remember like afterwards, my good friend at the time, his name was Angus. Well, that wasn't his actual name, but like every time we like saw each other, we would always say the most epic way to kill something because we were referencing that scene from Godzilla 2014. And for us at that time, yes, that was one of the most epic ways you could have killed something. That scene's great. I love that scene. Fun fact, that scene was improvised. Like Gareth Edwards did not plan for that scene to be in there. It just kind of happened.
Wait, what just kind of happened?
That's the kiss of death scene where Godzilla's spitting atomic breath down the female Muto's mouth. That wasn't originally in the script. They only did it because I think somebody on set just so happened to suggest it. They were like, "Hey, what if he kills the Muto this way?" And they're like, well, "Okay, we'll try it out." Like that wasn't originally in the script.
Interesting. Wow. That's if that hadn't been in the movie, I can't imagine. Like, in a way, I feel like that. This might be extreme, but I feel like that was the saving grace of the movie was just having that such a cool moment. And if this movie didn't have that, I don't know.
No,
I don't
I
know.
agree. Because this movie, I think, is what made a lot of like. Because much like how I feel, this is a little off topic, but I feel like Captain America: The Winter Soldier made a lot of people realize how cool of a character Captain America is, and this movie with that scene definitely, I feel, made a lot of people realize how cool Godzilla is.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely feel like that. Like, yeah, again, if that scene hadn't been in the movie, especially like the first time I watched it, I feel like I would have just been like, well, that was boring. Oh well. But like the fact that I like the ending was like, man, that was kind of boring. But then like at the end, it got really cool. If they hadn't had that, yeah, I feel like it would have given me a completely different perception of Godzilla and just the movie overall. But I guess as far as like my favorite scene goes, so aside from that scene at the very end, oof, that's hard because again, like a lot of these, there's not really a lot of cool stuff. But I do think it's kind of cool the nighttime train sequence when they're trying to transport the bombs to San Francisco, and they're like on the train tracks, and they're like, oh, it's something up ahead, we got to go check it out, make sure the bridge is stable. And then the Muto comes and like disrupts and takes the bomb or whatever. I think that whole sequence is kind of cool. Like you get the cool shot where Ford is just laying on the tracks, like on the bridge, and the Mito's head is just like right there. So it's like, oh man, is he gonna like, is the Mito gonna sniff him or like catch him or attack or whatever? And just like the scale of the Mutos and all the monsters, Godzilla included, like the scale in this movie, and that's something that Gareth Edwards is so good at doing, is creating such a great sense of scale. But yeah, like the scale, the size of the monsters, like their weight, the movement, just all of it. I don't know. It's not really like a big thing, but I like that scene. I don't know. It's a cool little sequence.
Still grossed out by the part though where the female Muto like starts walking and you just see her egg sac like jiggling around. Ugh.
Well, it's funny because Ford also makes a face like, "Ugh, what is that?"
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just like, it's an animal, I guess. But
What about you, Miranda? You have any favorite scenes?
Just the part with Godzilla and shooting the fire breath. That's really the only one that stands out to me.
That's fair. Like I've already said, I mentioned the kiss of death. I love the airport scene. That's one of my favorite scenes, even though it's not that long. Um, I also like the Golden Gate Bridge scene as well. I think it's cool because, like Udi was saying, just the sense of scale you get in that scene is very like breathtaking because like they actually show you like a point of view shot to what it would be just to see how large like Godzilla would look if you were there on the Golden Gate Bridge just looking up at him like that was really cool. And I don't know, it's kind of weird, but like I think it's kind of cool to see like other militaries from other countries like fight Godzilla, because like Godzilla for 70 plus years has always just fought the Japanese Defense Force, and it's classic. It's cool. I like it when he fights the Japanese Defense Force, but it's also interesting to see like other militaries take him on. Like, how would the U.S. military take on Godzilla? I think that's interesting. How would other militaries take him on? Like, I don't know. It's weird stuff like that interests me. So like it was kind of cool like seeing like the US Army like fight Godzilla in that scene as well. Oh, I was gonna say, Riley, did you have any other favorite parts in the movie besides the kiss of death scene?
The tail whip, 100%. Just the Muto charging at Godzilla, and you're just waiting to see what he's gonna do, and then just 360s him. Oh, it was
Awesome.
fantastic. Absolutely. But I think a fun fact was the original suit actor from 1954's Godzilla was made an appearance in this movie, but it was a cut scene, uh, which I thought was really cool. But it said it was a cut scene.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, he was I think like a clerk or something at the airport or something like that. Like there's I don't know if it's in the behind the scenes or something, but I know I saw a still of it. Yeah, the suit actor was in the movie, but not in the final release.
Well, that's disappointing. I wonder why they cut it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure. It was very cool to see though.
That is a very fun fact. I did not know that. Well, it is time for the lizard fact of the day. Yay, it's back. We haven't done one of these in a long time. But today's lizard of the day is the blue Mexican alligator lizard, also known as the green arboreal alligator lizard. It is an endangered lizard. It is commonly found in pine oak forest canopies, and this habitat offers a humid, temperate climate with summer rains. Their color palette can range from bright emerald green to dark teal blue, and the juvenile coloration is a tan ground color with dark crossbands. So I definitely see why it has two names. But that's the lizard fact of the day. So let's get into our star rating. Riley, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I think I would give it a solid 4.0. I think there are some things that could be improved, but I think it was a very solid foundation for a new era. So a solid 4.
4 is a nice score. Okay. Udi, what's yours?
I give Godzilla 2014 a 3.5 out of 5. As I said before, it's like the very definition of a mixed bag. You have the great elements and you got some very weak elements, and it never quite gels together. But I will say that if I was Gareth Edwards, I would still be super, super proud of having this be one of my like first films ever, and like being like my first big like studio film, and to just like have this in my like portfolio. Like I would be super, super proud of that. So it may not be the best Godzilla movie ever. It may not be like the most memorable or like amazing movie ever, but I still feel like there's a lot of great work here. And like Riley said, it was a great foundation for like a new beginning.
Well said. Dan?
All right, I agree with what both of you guys have said. I'm gonna give this movie a 3 out of 5. Like, as a longtime Godzilla fan that had to wait 10 years to get this movie, I think this movie does deliver in some aspects. Like, it delivers in Godzilla's design, it delivers in the action and like making him look like a badass character. It delivers in all that, but there's just too many shortcomings in my eyes to make it seem like the best that there's just too many shortcomings in my eyes for it to be like for it to have been like a great film after 10 years of no Godzilla. Like, I don't like the constant cutaways. I don't find the characters interesting. And I never got to see Godzilla destroy a city, which isn't a criticism against the movie. That's not a criticism against the movie. That doesn't bring the movie down in my eyes. But I was just really looking forward to seeing something like that. And, well, I never got it. So it kind of disappointed me in some aspects. But like Udi and Riley said, I think it was a great foundation for the start of a new era of Godzilla films, and it's really surprising to me that the MonsterVerse is still going. Like, I'm surprised, and I'm also glad. The more Godzilla content, the better.
Yes, the more Godzilla content, the better. I'm also going to give it a 3. You know, it's a Godzilla movie that's got some interesting things, but also is kind of not the vibe that I usually go towards. For Godzilla movies, I like the weird alien ones normally, and fortunately, this does not have it. I mean, they kind of get into that later on, but we're not talking about those. So, yeah, a 3, pretty like average, medium, well done, but a little lacking in some areas Godzilla movie. So, the Atomic Lizard's average score for Godzilla 2014 is 3.375. Thank you, Riley, for joining us. It was a pleasure having you here. I hope you had a good time, and you're always welcome back if you would like to come back.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it was a great talk, and I had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
So glad you could join us. So thank you so much for joining us and listening to our conversation about Godzilla 2014. If you're interested in hearing more, check out our previous episodes, and as always, you can find us on Instagram at Atomic Lizards Pod and on Letterboxd at Atomic_Lizards.